Hey, so you probably stumbled on this video because you got the Polyend tracker and you made a nice little 2-bar loop there and you're going nuts and you think, I want to make this into something a little bit longer, and really the Polyend's really good for that. But how do we get the Polyend to work really nice with the song mode? And we could just take that 2-bar loop and start arranging in the song view. But there's a few things we can do right now to extend out that loop to make a much easier block to work with. But we can also change it up so we can create some different versions. So when we come to arranging, we've got more to work with. So let's not talk anymore. Let's get straight into it. So we're back in front of the Polyend tracker and we have our little track that's happening here. And we've done all the work now that we've had something that's really nice and polished. We've got some sound design elements in there. We've got all the music elements in there. So really what we need to start doing is actually making a beat or a track. And yeah, right now we've got 2 bars of music, which if we were to let that loop over and over again, is going to get very monotonous very quick. So what I wanted to do was go a little bit more into how we can extend this out. And we have a couple of ways of doing that. So we do have a option with length at 220, which is in hexadecimal. So that is 32 in normal units. So we've got 2 bars here, so 16, 32. And we could go and extend that out to 40. But as you saw at the end of the loop, we have all this new data that we could start entering in. But that gets a bit tedious. And what else we could do, we could come up here and just copy and paste everything down and start working on it, but that's sort of a tedious way of doing it as well. Polyend has actually given us a really cool little feature. Now, these 3 buttons here, these 2 are really good for copying between the patterns, but we've got expand pattern. If I hit that one, it's going to space everything out by 2, so it plays really slowly, which could be an effect that you're looking for. I'm just going to undo that. We've also got shrink pattern, which does the complete opposite. It halves the pattern size, so you'll be losing bits of information in the sequence. But the one I like using is duplicate pattern, which is really what we're going to do, copy and paste down. All I need to do, just make sure that there's no blank information at the end, because they'll get duplicated as well. We just hit duplicate. And we're currently sitting on 4 or 40 or 64 steps. So we've got 4 bars of music to work with. Now at this point, what I like to do is, if we were to play this now, it'd just be the same as 2-bar loop. So we need to change up that second part. And we can keep some things, change some things, see how it works together. But what I like to do is just work on certain sections. So I've got the drums. So we've got that nice little ending part here. So if you go shift play, it'll play from this point here. So what I'm thinking is if we change that, I think I've got it set to the drums. Nope, it must be. So instead of going down, I might make that go up. Cool. We'll do something with the drums as well, so give it a bit more of a feel. So it's something interesting, and then with the hi-hats we might just leave. So if we bring all our drums together, we got our first part. So it's a little bit different, but your ear picks up on it. Next, I want to work on the bass line, because this is might add some extra notes in here. So I'm just going to set 14. So let's hear it in context with the drums. So I just really had to add 1 note and add that extra variance that we needed. Let's have a look at the melody line. I might change up this last part as well, because what I'm doing is I'm staying above in the last bar that I'm editing. So if we were to think of each of the little 16 bar sequences as its own little pattern, what I've got is I've got 1 and 3 the same, 2 is its own thing, and then 4, which is the one I'm working on here between 3-0 and 4-0 or 3F, has a different feel. So if I edit that last one, it's really bringing out that sequence, but we're giving the listener something that they can grab on with 1 and 3, and then 2 and 4 is having something different for them to explore. So it's just a nice way, I think, of changing it up, but it's not a hard and fast rule as well. So I'm just going. So while I'm listening to this as well, I'm just keeping in mind that how it's going to lead back on itself. So I've got Fs which lead to an E, so a nice little step down back into the original pattern. And that brings it all in context, and then we'll just listen to it with all the other elements. Cool. We are going to quickly go through the last parts now. And what I might do is flip these two around so it goes G and then F. Cool. And then it doesn't fight with the rest of the melody. And the last part, we have that texture, which by itself, all it's doing is just giving us a bit of noise that we can work through. I'm just making sure that it will play the entirety of the sample. Cool. All right, so those little bits of tweaks that we've done in that 4th bar really extended out what we've done. Now we've got a 4-bar loop that we can take into song mode and really start working with it. But me personally, I like to actually duplicate the pattern again and work down in the 8th bar, because with how I look at music, now this is a very boring analogy, when I'm working in song mode, I like working with blocks. Now, one of these blocks could be compared to a paragraph. So when you write an essay, you write a paragraph, that paragraph has a body, but also has an introduction and a conclusion. So you're always linking to the next paragraph as you're working forward. So when I work in 8-bar loops, I like to have the first bar is sort of like the intro, and then the last bar sort of links to the next bar. So I have these transition points between different types of blocks, and they all work nicely together. Now, with that, usually what happens is I edit, same thing, I edit the last bar of music, because in the first section we've got the first pattern that's sort of like the establishment, and then we have like the call and response. So that first, third, 5th and 7th bars are pretty much the same, unless with your style of music you can change it up. But it gives a sense of grounding for when we bring in like the 2nd and the 4th element, which are different phrases in the bar. It sort of links it all together quite nicely. So if I go about editing this last bar, it gives me something that I can sort of make sure that my song is steering between the different types of blocks. Now, when it comes to changing the pattern up, don't feel that you always have to keep adding notes. You can take notes away and it creates that sort of interest as well. I'm just making a little drum fill at the end, and I thought instead of having, I've got extra drums on the side, but for that little, that part there, in the last part I've got, which is completely different, but it gives me a lot of room to change into something else. So it gives a little bit of breathing room for the listener and then goes into something else. So definitely experiment with what you change and take away. Next, I want to work on the bass line, which I sort of did the same thing. I took notes away. And the melody line, I did take some notes away as well. So all in all, we have the, get everything together. So that's the first part, and then if I go down to 60 and play from there. Something a little bit different, but now I have this much larger block. This is where I usually like to be before I start thinking about plotting stuff into the song editor mode. But this is also another point, like It's really fast on the Polyend tracker to get to a point where you have a nice little loop of an idea, whether you've recorded some samples and created something really cool, or you've done some experiments and they've gone awry and you got something that sounds interesting. We'll keep it at that. This is where I like to take a sort of look at what I've made and see if there's potential to take it on further, like through some of my other things, like photography. When I take a whole bunch of photos, I'll usually have hundreds, and then I cut it down to 20 or the 5 photos that I really like, and then I spend the time working on them. So on the Polyend tracker, I sort of take this as, did I create something that I think is worthwhile taking to that next step? And for this tutorial series, I actually do enjoy this little beat. It's something, not what I usually make, it's something a little bit different, kooky, but I do enjoy this one, so I do want to take it to that next step. And with this 8-bar loop that I've got, I can start bringing into the song mode and start plotting it out. But if we start playing with this melody, so I'm just going to use the mutes and say I wanted to start with the drums and the bass line. We'll keep the texture sound. Now I'll start bringing elements in. We can start listening to the song in one way, but really we only have one idea. And what I like to do is I'll take this entire pattern. So like I said before, we've got this copy button. So what I like to do is I like to copy what I've made and then actually duplicate it onto a different channel. Now I picked pattern 3 very specifically to paste into. But this is going to be our second idea. So we have the first idea that we start bringing in, we can start making changes to it, but then we can flip to a second part that sounds different but the same. So we have a second idea to work on our song. Now, usually what happens is we make the most intense part of our song. There's a lot of stuff going on in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut back to say 20. So I've got my 2 bars again, and I reckon we could probably change the drums a little bit. The bass line will probably get changed a little bit too, but that melody line I'm pretty much going to gut and then rework. So what I might do, just be crazy for a second. Actually doesn't sound too bad. Now, one thing I like about the Polyend tracker, just because of how our trackers are, we create these instruments and then we create these layers, and because I've got all my lead instruments in one lane, what I can do is use this scroll wheel to actually sample different voicings we can use for the next part. So I was just mucking around and I found this little combo actually sounds really cool. I like that sort of fluty sound, and it works well with everything else. So what I might do is I'll keep majority of this one, and then I'll start working to tweak out the parts that I don't like those ramp ups, which I think are these parts here. So I might change them into something else. So spending a bit of time, if I switch between pattern 1. So that's what we had there, and then doing a little bit of tweaking. And I've got that linkage back to the first part, so if I play all these together, it's something completely different to what we had in the first pattern, but it's something else that we can change the song into, so we can create a bit of different dynamic with this, and we're going to use this later on in the next video. But for now, this is an idea that really helps bring out more of the song, because if we can start creating blocks of information that work well together, so say if I can go from pattern A to pattern B to pattern C, and say I want to go from pattern C to pattern A, and they all work together nicely, we have much more of the song that we can put together in that song mode. So it's a really nice way to give us something to work with. we did write this in the most intense part of the sound. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that pattern again. We'll get out of that, and we're going to go to pattern 2 and paste, because what I like to do is I have like the most intense part of the song, and then I create a very mellow version of that, and then we have 3, which was the most intense part for the second part, and then I'll go about making a simpler version of that. So it gives us a different way to put together our music. Like we could pick some low intensity snares and samples and pair it with like high intensity drums. It just gives us more to play with, that we don't have to go into the tracker and start trying to create something. We've got blocks that we can work with. What I might do is I'm going to start with the drums. Just done some work with the hi-hats, and I've got the low intensity version, and then if we switch it to the high intensity version, so it gives us something that we can switch between the two. And then, so this block here I can use to sort of bring elements in, or we can use it to take elements out. So if I have really intense drums and then I lead into a less intense drums to cut off later on in the song, we have all that data saved in these nice little blocks that we can work with. So now I've got more quieter drums. I've taken out some of the kicks and I've changed the snare to a cowbell, just to give something that's a little bit less harsh, because the snare I do have in here is a lot louder than that. So listening to this compared to so it just gives us something to work with when we start bringing those patterns together. So after all that, so creating some different versions, extending sections, taking sections away, changing up the voicing, so changing the instruments, I was able to create 4 different versions. So we've got 1 and 2, which is one version, and 3 and 4, which is a different version. And really this was just fiddling on the box, so I did cut out a bit of the grunt work because it's just me fiddling around. It's like listening to the sound. But now we have 4 separate sections that we can work with. So I'll just go through them each. So that's 1. So this is the cut down version. And then we have this version here. Actually, it might be better to start on 4 because we want to slowly bring this one in. So it's a lot softer. It does follow the same melodic contour. Some of the times, like if you're doing this type of work, you might want to change the melodic contour in a different part. So this is where it's really important to experiment. But leading from then, and that's just, I haven't added any new instruments. I haven't made anything new. I've just gone through the current instruments I've got, change the octaves on certain things to see how they sound, and yeah, it's just a really nice way, once we get all the grunt work done with creating our instruments, creating our patterns, being able to change that pattern in a variety of ways. Like I haven't removed these because these were our working files, but we have our actual sound files that we're going to be using for our arrangement. So this is a really nice position that we're going to be in, and really this is another point where I'm like, I do enjoy what I've got right there. Like I actually was quite surprised with how these 2 parts work well together. So I really want to take this to the next step, and I'm just going to file, save what I've done. So I saved my project, and I just wanted to finish up a bit about where we are right now, because with the Polyend tracker, one thing I really enjoy about it is I can pull this out in about 15 or 20 minutes, have something like this ready to go. Maybe it's just one pattern, or what we have here where it's a couple of patterns that work really nice together. And what I like doing before I continue on into the song mode is actually spend a bit of time listening to what I've created. Like go away, make your coffee, come back and sit down and listen, or same thing, pack it up, give it a day or 2, come back to it, because I find in the moment I might think it sounds really cool, especially late at night, and then come back to it in the morning and it's like some of the things could be changed a bit. So what I like to do is, yeah, just work on these things. Don't feel bad if there's like a whole bunch of different musical babies sitting there that are unfinished and that. I find it's a lot easier to make one of these patterns into a arrangement if they actually sound good by themselves or they sound good in tandem with just going through the pattern mode, switching these up. If this sounds good to jumping into that one or sit down. So it's really about experimenting, listening to what you've created, and then make a judgment call on that and create something that will either benefit, or if you feel that this is a cool little idea but it will just keep in the file, don't feel bad. It does happen. We do all create interesting bits of music every now and again that doesn't see the light of day, but I think that's part of the journey. So we're in a really nice spot and I'm going to leave it there. So I hope you found that useful, because we're in a really nice position now. We have our blocks, we have variants of our blocks, and when it comes to plotting those blocks into the song mode, you'll find that you'll have a much easier time to start laying everything out. In the next video, we're really going to be focusing on that arranging, and we'll have a full pattern ready to go with some tweaks and variants. So definitely stick around for that one. And when I was talking about coming up with these ideas and seeing if they're valid, like, I really enjoy this idea, I'm definitely going to keep moving forward with it. But I could sit with the Polyend tracker for a couple of hours or a day and come up with a whole bunch of different ideas. And it's a really good idea to get into that, because you get to test out ideas. You could think, I want to try that and blend it with that and see how it comes out, because those sort of ideas really elevate your skill set. And some of the tracks I've worked on in the past, and I'm like, oh, I don't think I could take that any further. Doing that, going forward, and then being able to come back and give those ideas new life, have created some really interesting stuff. So definitely keep that in mind when you're working on your track. Also, if you really enjoy this video and you think it's going to help someone else out, definitely give it a thumbs up, because it helps the algorithm point it to those people with the Polyend tracker. And if you want to support what I'm doing here, I do have these lovely shirts available. So all in all, I hope you had a good time, and I look forward to seeing you next time.